Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Everything you are about to hear is supposed to be true. The facts have not been changed to protect the innocent-minded, nor have they been twisted, snipped, clipped, or spun into spider silk to suit a particular political or ideological perspective. While this may be unusual, uncomfortable, or even awkward for audiences unaccustomed to unfiltered media, others may find it refreshing, insightful, informative, and even fun. In some cases, listeners have reported feelings of liberated euphoria and a rapid self-realization, allowing them to see the forest for the trees, and on occasion, run for them. In the rarest of instances, complete and total transformative cosmic thinking occurred, allowing the occasional listener to formulate reliably accurate mental models of modern quantum motion, a phenomenon which has been long associated with making pants optional life choices. So whether you're about to be weirded out, turned on, or freaked up, you have only yourself and the universe to blame, for you have been warned. This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kirsten and Blair.
Good science to you too, Justin. Happy Thursday. And happy science to everyone out there. I'm glad to be here. Glad everyone's here. And we have some great science news for you today. Lots of it.
Science news and a fantastic guest as well.
I was going to say, we actually have a little less science news than normal because we have a guest. Our guest today is Chris Mooney. He's the author of The Republican Brain, the science of why they don't believe in science. And if the name Chris Mooney reminds you of stuff, we've interviewed him before. He is the author of The Republican War on Science. And between these two books about Republicans, he wrote a book about hurricanes, the big storms. Yeah, little shift of gears there. But he's back on his political science bent, and we will be talking with him in the second half of the show. I'm very excited to be talking with him about this book because I got some questions. I do.
Mm-hmm.
Really? I want to know. Really? Is there a Republican brain? But first, we have the science news for you. Justin, what did you bring?
I have got stories about objectifying women. I have an insight into whale barf, historic water levels, and I think I got one more in there somewhere.
Historic water levels.
Oh, yeah, and the red wine diet. Ooh,
I think I like that diet. I would like to go on that diet. Blair, what did you bring today?
I brought a story about vertebrates and herbicides such as RoundUp, and that they can actually change your morphology.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Not looking forward to that.
I know, I brought it down, didn't I?
Oh,
Red wine diet and then mutation.
Yeah. We have Blair Downer. It's not Debbie Downer, I guess. No. No. And I'm going to kick off the show with a story about feathered dinosaurs. And it's not a story about birds per se, but really feathered dinosaurs. There was a finding this recently, not this last week, but they've been publishing this last week. Giant dinosaur, a tyrannosauroid, so a relative of Tyrannosaurus rex. They call him Eutyrannus huali. And I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but this is a really interesting find because this dinosaur was while not being quite as large as T-Rex, was still a really big dinosaur, weighing in at around a ton, probably about 30 or so feet long, or meters maybe. Am I getting that measurement wrong? Anyway, it's 7 or 8 meters in length. This is a really big dinosaur, and to date, we've been looking at dinosaurs, most of them anyway, as scaled creatures, very similar to the reptiles that we know and love today. However, and there have been feathered dinosaur fossils found before. These feathered dinosaur fossils, however, are usually a lot smaller, more in the raptor group of dinosaurs as opposed to these larger tyrannosaurs. Okay, so one fossil in dinosaurs is usually it's a great find. This finding they've got is based on 3 feathered fossils of the Eutyrannus species, and these 3, it was one adult and a couple of juveniles. They were not completely feathered. They didn't find a complete fossil fully feathered for all 3 to be able to say. But the fact that all 3 fossils had evidence of feathers, that's great. It shows that feathers were not necessarily a trait that was part of a juvenile life stage, that maybe the feathers fell off as they reached adulthood. This means that they were feathered their entire lives. And now when you think of the feathers, it's not like little tiny downy feathers. We're talking like 13-inch long feathers. Talking big, fluffy feathers. Kind of like a kiwi bird, or just very fluffy in nature, which is really a different way to start thinking about the Tyrannosaurus family. And that's exactly, not 13 inches. I'm getting my measurements all wrong today. 15 centimeters. There we go. We'll get the numbers right. 15 centimeter feathers. The really interesting thing is that this is leading to researchers rethinking the Tyrannosaurid group. So not that T-Rex, being a relative, was scaled, but that T-Rex possibly had feathers. The only thing that I would think that would go against this way of thinking is that they haven't found any T-Rexes with feathers. So there have been a number of T-Rex fossils found, not with feathers, so that, why would you necessarily think that they have feathers if you haven't found evidence of them? But it's not necessarily something that you would find in the fossil record, as feathers do disintegrate more easily than the scaling. So anyway, very interesting. It's like a giant emu dinosaur that ate meat. A big, scary emu.
It does really change the picture of the big predators. Let's see them that way.
Yeah, it does. I mean, maybe T-Rex was big and fluffy, but still had, lots of big teeth and a strong bite. I
picture him walking like a chicken now, which is really just sort of takes away from the whole terror of the creature. I'd be laughing as I was devoured.
That kind of jerky motion that they get where their heads go forward. Yeah. If we can imagine T-Rex walking like a chicken and fluffy, like big fluffy feathers.
Pecking at little mammals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another issue of this. So we know that dinosaurs were cold-blooded. So what does this necessarily mean about how they insulated? So maybe these feathers were insulation. Very possibly they were used for sexual signaling, for mating and coloration, and that was maybe a sexual trait, but they probably served a purpose of insulation. So enabling the large predators to be able to maintain body heat in colder climates.
Perhaps, but the mass of them too. I mean, they have these incredible, huge masses, which creates really high levels of heat towards the interior. So then I wonder if they even really would require it for that. Maybe that was something evolutionary hangover from a smaller version that stuck. Because once you get to that size, you really don't need. I wouldn't think you would need any additional insulation.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about going several like feet into the interior to get to the belly of the beast. That's a lot of thermal heat going on in there.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that large mammals today, they don't have a lot of hair. So we don't have woolly mammoths. We have elephants that don't have body hair. They have a tough hide because they lose heat really slowly. They've got a lot of mass to hold that heat in. So I don't know, but elephants, woolly mammoths were warm-blooded and not cold-blooded. So it is interesting. It is a question. We do not yet know the answer to this question, but there are paleontologists on the case. I know this. I know it. Justin, tell me a story.
When she enters a room, everyone notices. As she walks past priests punch holes in stained glass windows, dogs stop searching for bones, and other women want to know what she's wearing. It's not her clothes, it's her perfume. And the secret ingredient? Whale vomit.
Ambergris. Ambergris?
Yes, that's the stuff. I've never heard of this before. I had no idea. I knew that
a
whale
secret
oil
ingredient
had been used, but I didn't know it was whale vomit that they were using perfume. So I guess when in this instance, when sperm whales consume sharp objects, seashells, fish bones, their guts produce that ambergris, the sticky stuff to protect the digestive organs. Then they like a cat coughing up a fur ball, they regurgitate the little ambergris balls, which react with the salt water, and it turns it into these little rock hard objects that then wash ashore, are collected, and then the compound is used to add it to high-end perfumes to allow them to stay on the skin longer. It's a that's how. I just want to know, how did somebody figure that one out? Like, that's a lot of experimentation. They've gotten to the point where it's like, oh, you know what's really good for perfume? Makes it last a long time. A good fixative property comes from whale vomit. But now, University of British Columbia researchers have identified a gene in balsam fir trees that could facilitate cheaper and more sustainable production of plant-based fixatives and scents that are being used currently with ambergris. So this is great because we've been trying to get animal products out of a lot of cosmetics for many years. It's something that's, kind of controversial if you're somebody who, even though they're not harvesting the whale for this. I guess they just still don't want to be using animal products on their skin, some folks. So this is a pretty big step for that. This is one of those, I had no idea. I never would have guessed. There's no way I would have first of all, I didn't know that whales coughed up fur balls of this stuff. But yeah, and it could also be much less expensive because this is also one of those things that's very hard to collect. It only washes up on certain shores at certain times of the year, and it depends on how much vomiting the sperm whales have been doing at the time.
And how many sperm whales there are. So, our practices in the ocean reducing the populations of these whales and making this compound less available.
So for the longevity of the perfume industry, they need to get off of their dependence on foreign whale vomit. There's also another compound that was found here recently in red wine, a similar structure to resveratrol, or as I like to call it, reversidol. This is able to block cellular processes that allow fat cells to develop, opening a door to potential method to control obesity. This is a study from Purdue University. Ki-Hong Kim, an assistant professor of food science, and Young-Yeon Kwan, a graduate student in Kim's laboratory, reported in this week's issue of the Journal of Biological Chemistry that the compound, which I cannot pronounce, it's like pisatinol. I'm going to go with that. Picatinol? Pisatinol. I'll just go with that. Blocks an immature fat cell's ability to develop and grow. Well, it's a similar structure to the reversidol, the compound found in red wine that's thought to have sort of age-reversing or anti-cancer properties. Also fights heart disease, neurodegenerative disease, lots of stuff. Pisatinol might be as an important weapon against obesity. So this is what, and the compound is actually starts as reversidol and then is converted to pisatinol in humans after consumption, which is part of the reason why you can't just drink a whole lot of wine and have it give you those effects. They want to pull it out, pull the reversidol. Because I can't say it. Every time I see the word, I think it's reversidol. Resveratrol. They want to make a compound that you can take as a drug eventually that can have the effects. And this pisatinol also has a problem because it doesn't last. It denigrates really quickly and once it's been converted from reversidol. So they're actually going to work now on a couple of things. They're going to work on a way to allow it to last longer in the body so it can complete more of its anti-fat growing effects. So far they've only done this this is a very primitive study to begin with. I think they've done this based on cell cultures using an animal model of obesity. And so they also have to increase what they're, maybe go to a mouse next, something like that to try this again. But they found that pisatinol binds to insulin receptors of immature fat cells in the first stage of adipogenesis. And it blocks the insulin's ability to control cell cycles and activate genes that carry out further stages of fat cell formation. Basically, it just blocks the pathways necessary for the immature fat cell to grow into the mature fat cell.
Right.
Which usually happens by watching too much TV on the couch and eating potato chips. And basically, it sets it out. It basically sends the immature fat cell out into the yard to mow the lawn and do some chores. But wouldn't it be great that you could go on the red wine diet? It's like, you know what? I'm drinking this wine for my health. It's gonna keep the cancer at bay. It's gonna keep my neurons firing properly, and I'm gonna lose some weight. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There's been the question for a while. Why do people who drink wine seem to be slimmer than people who don't? There's a trend in that direction. And a lot of people put it down to lifestyle choices, other things that go along with drinking red wine. But maybe it actually does have something to do with this pathway that the resveratrol and the pisatinol are actually working to block fat formation, so that when you do drink the red wine, that you are for a meal while you are drinking the wine and eating food, that the food that you eat isn't necessarily going to be converted immediately into fat stores in your body, that it will be put to other purposes, just immediate energy generation purposes, as opposed to fat stores, because of this blockage of the immature cell growth. I don't know. That's what I would think of it. And if we could create a pill that would follow along that way, that's awesome.
But it already comes in a bottle.
I know. I would prefer to drink the wine to popping a pill, but that's not for everyone. So maybe we can have options for everyone. Thanks to science.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Yeah, these were
science coming up with the best solutions for everything.
Yeah, not diet and exercise. Just drink red wine.
All right, everyone, if you just tuned in, this is This Week in Science. It is time for Blair's Animal Corner.
Blair's Animal Corner. Yeah.
She's dancing in the corner, see?
Hello.
Hello.
So today, my story is a little less focused on direct animal biology and something that happened in a study with animals, which I found very interesting. So a new study found that pesticides can induce morphological changes in vertebrate animals. So that's kind of scary. So what happened was...
Yeah, what exactly? So vertebrate animals...
Yes.
We're vertebrate animals, but there are lots of vertebrate animals.
So first of all, this happened with amphibians, and specifically it was types of frogs and toads. And so the interesting thing about amphibians is that because they breathe cutaneously through their skin, they're really sensitive to a lot of chemicals. And so they're really sensitive. They respond really quickly to any sort of pollution or contaminant in an environment. And that's why they're called indicator species a lot of the time. They're the first animals to react to something unusual in their environment. So what they found was that there was some weird things happening in response to pesticides and herbicides. And so somebody actually did a direct experiment. And he took 3 different types of amphibians. I want to say they were... leopard frogs, American toads, and another type of toad. I can't find it now. But they put them in tanks that were basically simulated wetlands. They added all sorts of leaves and a lot of the compounds and natural things you would find in a wetland. And then they added different amounts of certain things to their environment. One thing they noticed was that if a predator was in that environment, they would grow from tadpole to frog. As they were a tadpole, they would grow a bigger and bigger tail to help them escape the predator. And so I guess there was hormones were responding in their body from hormones in the water from that predator. And so it was causing a larger tail growth. And what they saw was that the RoundUp in the water, the herbicide, the weed killer, was causing the same response.
So even if there was no predator present, it was causing changes in the bodies of the frogs as if there was.
Right. So for example, I would have a tank that was just a normal wetland. I would have a tank that had some RoundUp in the water, and it was sublethal amounts, obviously.
Yeah.
Otherwise, kind of a boring experiment. Then they would have a tank with the predators in them, but the predators would be in a cage. So they wouldn't actually be able to eat the tadpoles in the tank.
They're there.
But they're there. So
there's a threat.
They were there.
Yes.
And then they had one with both predators and RoundUp in it. Now, here's the really interesting part. They saw pretty much the same tail growth in the RoundUp tank as the predator tank. And then in the one that had both in it, they saw a double tail growth, twice as large.
Oh, my goodness.
So at first you're thinking, oh, that's actually a good thing, right? Makes them faster, makes them... No, not really. It's pretty cumbersome if you think about it.
All of a sudden you have this big, heavy tail hanging off the same sized animal.
Right.
And they're probably slower. And
if you don't have a predator threat and then you have a giant tail on you, you're probably not going to get food as well. You're not going to be as agile. It's going to kind of be detrimental to you. So that's really interesting because now we found experimental evidence that this plant targeting pesticide, an herbicide, is definitely affecting the growth of a vertebrate, which is pretty scary stuff because then you're thinking about, okay, just like with pollutants with indicator species, they're the first ones to show something before you find out other things are getting affected later on. So if the amphibians are getting affected by this RoundUp, what's happening to other animals that maybe it's going into their gills if they're fish, or maybe it's going back into the soil and it's going to affect our plants in some ways. And what if it ends up in our water? What's it going to do to us?
Right. So the end of that cascade of thoughts is
Human with
what
a
about
tail.
People? Yeah, human with a tail.
Well, I wouldn't say no to a tail, but I don't know. It'd have to be furry, I think.
Yeah, and
I might like a big fox tail.
We'll see if we can get you some RoundUp specific to creating giant furry foxtails.
Let's work on that.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess the big thing about this so far is that we have the indicator species, kind of the canary in the coal mine kind of species. We see that there's a problem taking place, but now we have to ask the question, okay, how much were they exposed to? Were they exposed to amounts that are normally found in the environment, or were they exposed to higher concentrations than normal? Because very often, like in the laboratory, there are lots of mouse experiments where they will give a mouse a drug and then say, oh, see, it has a bad effect. But then you find out later that they've been given these really huge concentrations.
So it says that they used environmentally relevant herbicide concentrations, which was 0, 1, 2, or 3 milligram acid equivalents.
So basically what would be found in an environment.
Right.
Different concentrations. Yeah. Okay. So then we have to figure out whether or not the physiology of the amphibian is dramatically enough different to, from other animals. They're really affected by hormones, but what kind of a concentration curve, what kind of thresholds are necessary? Like there's a whole lot that needs to be figured out. This is the beginning of a big,
and I
big
undertaking.
undertaking.
Know what happens to those toads and frogs once they lose that oddly large tail if they survive? Are there effects in adult life or not?
Right. Yeah. If it's affecting that morphology, well, it's going to affect survival rates. That's number one, which is bad. But then you're right. Number two, then does it affect reproduction? Because if you're dealing with hormones, I mean, these are stress hormones, most likely, that are causing the morphology changes. So corticosteroid type things, which are not necessarily, they're involved in sex hormone cycles, but are not necessarily directly influencing in the same way. So whether or not it will actually affect reproduction is that's a big question. Yay, pesticides. Oh, I love stuff like this. Woot. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's who did this study? Is Tyrone Hayes involved in this? Was it from UC Berkeley?
I don't
no, Rick.
University of Pittsburgh.
Okay, there's a guy out of UC Berkeley, Tyrone Hayes, who is who's been doing research on this kind of stuff for years. We should get him for an interview. That would be good. Yes, that would be interesting. But we have a different interview tonight. We do. And it is time for a station break. So
already?
Yeah.
I have so many more stories. I got to.
Do you want to do one more story?
I can do one more really quick because this one's actually important. There was one that was really important. International scientists have shown that dramatic sea level rise occurred at the onset of the first warm period in the last deglaciation, known as the Bowling warming, approximately 14,600 years ago. To sum this up as quickly as possible, the event, referred to as Meltwater Pulse 1A, corresponded to a rapid collapse of massive ice sheets that 14,600 years ago resulted in a global sea level rise of 14 meters, which is considerably high for where it is now. It's a quick snapshot on that. Is 3.2 billion people live within about 100 miles of the coastline, and a tenth of the population lives below even the 10-meter sea level, let alone that 14 that we could potentially be in another deglaciation period. So, that's one of the reasons that global warming could be a bad thing, because lots of people live near the water.
Yeah, a lot of people do. And another study looked at proxy data, which is like ice cores and other things. So you use gas trapped in ice cores, or you use the shells of mollusks to be able to look at carbon dioxide, be able to get it's a proxy for carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. And they looked at proxy data from over 80 or 80 locations around the globe, which is a really major change from past studies, because the typical ice core data has been Antarctica or the Arctic or maybe glaciers in South America. But we don't really have the total global coverage to see what was happening all around the globe. And they found this data went back 14,000 years to the last, I think it might be a similar study to what you're talking about, but it went 14,000 years to the last ice age. And they found that carbon dioxide increases came before increases in temperature. And so they have been able to really pinpoint carbon dioxide's role in the end of the last ice age, and which brought about that huge increase in sea level. But they still don't know where all the carbon dioxide came from, which is it's a big question. Where did it come from? People weren't doing stuff like we're doing now back then.
You know, I think the most plausible, if you have an ice age like that, I don't know. I have no idea how it could happen. But I always want to think forest fires. I always think forest fires because if you have an area that is just massively overgrown, just because in California, every year we have like this massive forest fire that happens somewhere in the state that burns for like months, and it takes every resource, planes flying over, dropping it, people cutting fire lines to get the thing contained within X amount of square miles. I can imagine in a day before man managing forests or eliminating a lot of them, that a forest fire could just run
burn and burn and burn and burn and burn.
Like, oh yeah, the decade-long fire of North America when it burned to the ground. So that's probably the most likely one that I can think of without some sort of meteoric contribution.
All right, so now let's go to our break. You're listening to This Week in Science, and we will be back with Chris Mooney to talk about the Republican brain in just a few moments. Twis would like to thank Audible.com for supporting this hour of our show. Audible.com is the leading provider of audiobooks with over 75,000 different titles in a variety of genres. And you know that we love science, and we've found all sorts of science-based books in the Audible library to date. You can start a free trial today and get a free audiobook download of your choice. That's right. I said free audiobook download. All you have to do is sign up at audiblepodcast.com/twist. That's audiblepodcast.com/twist. So go there right now and get your free download. Also, Twis has merchandise. Yes, we're selling stuff to support this science habit. We have merchandise that you might enjoy. Just head on over to twis.org and you can get yourself a copy of the 2010 Science Music Compilation CD. And if you're needing some clothing, a World Robot Domination t-shirt might fit the bill. We have some nice green t-shirts, robots. It's great. And you can support Twis in the process. And if you enjoy supporting Twis a lot, but you don't want a lot of stuff, we are supported by listeners like you and your donations. And your donations pay for our hosting, bandwidth, contractors we need to hire, fun things we like to do, by like putting bricks in the TWiT brick wall. We did that because of you. We appreciate any amount, $2 to $2 million. That's right. I'll take $2 million. You bet I will. We will take it, and we will make the show even better. You make the show possible. Go to twis.org. Go to the most recent episode page. Listen to the most recent episode. Maybe even if you haven't heard some back episodes, go to a back episode. listen to the episode, check out the show notes that are there, and go to the bottom of the page. There are donation buttons. You can donate through PayPal. We make it easy. You can do a once a month donation, or you can do a one-time donation. Your choice, but you do help us out. And so go there, twist.org, listen to a show, make a donation. We really appreciate your support. We couldn't do this without you.
All right, let's bring on our guest.
Yeah.
Hello?
Chris, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great.
Could you try sending us some video?
Yeah, just a minute.
Sure.
Let me get this all set up. This should do it. How's that?
That
How's that
appears
look?
to have done
There
it.
he is.
Great.
Yes,
Hello.
Hi,
How you
Chris.
guys doing? Hello.
Welcome
How's it
back.
going? Thank you. Thank you.
So we are in our station break right now. And so what we're going to do is do our theme music and then come back in and I'll introduce you and then we'll get to talking about
Great.
brains.
Sure thing.
Okay,
Okey-dokey.
Brian, do we need anything else?
No. Oh, except maybe let me check his lower third again real quick.
Okay.
Chris Mooney, republicanbrain.com is what I have underneath.
That's what you are you asking my opinion?
Yeah, is that cool with you,
You want
Chris?
that?
Sure.
Okie dokie.
Great.
Then I think I have. Yep, got everything set up. Okay, I
Okay.
will pod the music back in.
Excellent.
Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see. The answers lie somewhere within this.
And we're back with more This Week in Science.
That's
With us
right.
today?
And what?
Now, go ahead.
Like, what are you saying over there? And we have our guest, Chris Mooney, joining us via Skype. Chris, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's great to be with you.
And Chris Mooney is the author of The Republican Brain, The Science of Why They Don't Believe in Science, Why They Deny Science. He's also the author of The Republican War on Science, and he hosts the Point of Inquiry podcast, writes the Intersection blog for Science Progress, and has written for Mother Jones, American Prospect, Harper's, Washington Post, USA Today, Slate. You are a writing fiend, and you've got returned with this book to the political side of the science story in our country. You went in a different direction with your second book. Why come back to the Republican perspective on things?
Well, things have gotten kind of bad, I think people have noticed, in terms of the relationship between our political system and reality. And just watching it all unfold, I think it was kind of hard to ignore that, reality wasn't equally distributed among the parties lately. Stephen Colbert said that reality has a well-known liberal bias, and I wrote the book proving that that is scientifically true. So that's the idea. In other words, just couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, and I think there was a study that came out just recently. I just saw it in one of my RSS feeds about Republicans tend to view science as more of a liberal endeavor. And why is this? Can you just, in a nutshell, why? I mean, is it really all Republicans?
It's never all Republicans. I mean, you can find your issues where liberals have their problems, and I discuss them in the book. because I'm a responsible liberal. But, it's clearly mostly Republicans and it's clearly mostly conservatives that are having problems with science. I actually think it goes beyond science, but the data you referred to validates this concern. What it shows is this is a new study in the American Sociological Review, and it was actually designed to test whether the thesis of my first book, The Republican War on Science, was right. And it said, yes, this is strong evidence for the thesis because trust in the institution of science or the leaders of science has pretty much plummeted, but only for conservatives, over a roughly 35-year period. That is the period of science politicization. That is the period that changed America. It's the period of the modern conservative movement taking over the Republican Party, which used to be a very different thing. So, yeah, that is centrally the problem of the politics of science in America. There's just no getting around it. So you have to talk about politics. You really have to.
Yeah, here on Twis, we've thought that mixing science and politics for years has been, it's important, and we've made it a priority in what we do because it's not something that can just be ignored, even though so many people would just want to go science and politics, they don't go together. That's a mix.
We're so far past that point now. I mean, I'm sorry. It is unfortunate that it's like this, but you really can't, you just can't dodge it anymore. And so I further decided that, an institutional story of why this has happened wasn't enough. And the institutional story is the one I already told. And it's the one that the sociologist in the study we're talking about told. His name is Gordon Goshat. And this is about how, conservatives, they created their own experts. They created their own think tanks, and they could argue back then against academia. They created their own media where they could have the experts on the air, and then they could have their own knowledge. And this is all true. But, I think that you need a psychological explanation to go along with the institutional or political explanation. And so we also know that conservatives today, self-identifying conservatives, are just different people than they were 35 years ago. We know this because of the studies on authoritarianism and how, this trait that used to be more politically split coming out of the New Deal is now much, much more in one party than another. And an authoritarian is a person who sees things in black and white, doesn't really tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty. These are kinds of traits that don't go well with the scientific mindset. Tend toward religious fundamentalism. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that George Lakoff wrote a book about the political brain that went into the authoritarian side of viewing the world versus the more, or I guess less authoritarian.
Yeah, or anti-authoritarian. Liberals are like burn down all authority. I mean, this is a hugely divisive thing, and you point out Lakoff is great to point him out. There's really a convergence of evidence from a lot of different thinkers, and Lakoff was one of the pioneers. There's no doubt about that. There's a variety of different fields that are coming at this in different ways, but one of the themes that does persist is this, conservatives and respect for authority is one of the themes that you find pretty much in everybody, or respect for hierarchy, it's kind of the same thing, is one of the key psychological themes of conservatism.
And I want to stay away from bashing anybody in this. In our chat room, there are people already going in the direction of calling names, and there's bashing going on.
If you're bashful about it,
well, let them call me names because I think that would be fun. Yeah.
well, there was a moment in which Santorum was saying the global warming thing. Why are we giving up on this issue? Why are we giving in on this issue of global warming and climate change? As though all of global warming, as though all of climate change were a political issue that was being used to garner votes by the other political party, as though this had been invented as one of their political strategies and is not as something that the scientific community is banging on the doors of the politicians trying to alert them of a problem. So it's not that the scientists have politicized this. It's the Republicans have actually politicized science in a very very destructive way.
I mean, I do have to agree with you. Of course, we must credit that they certainly don't see it that way, but then they wouldn't.
And I think they do, though. See, this is where we probably disagree, though. I think they actually do. I think it's calculated. I mean, I don't think that they look at the science and look at it and say, gosh, you know what? That's just politically created. I actually think that they realize that they need to protect the backers, the money, the financial interests, and that's why they've made an issue. First of all, trying to avoid going after science by having just trying to create enough doubt about the scientific results, bringing on all these,
Well, no, I think that I am to a significant extent arguing against that perspective that you just articulated in terms of why this happens. And so I guess I should explain that. I mean, I was taught as a young journalist, political journalist, before I was a science writer, follow the money, and that's how you'll figure out what's going on with these guys. Yeah. Follow the money doesn't work very well for global warming anymore. I mean, basically you had a lot of, you had industry almost split evenly. Or maybe even leaning towards cap and trade. You had a lot of fossil fuel companies backing this idea, which was, after all, supposed to be a free market conservative type of idea. What went wrong there? I mean, there's a deep ideological core to this that is more than just ExxonMobil, which stopped funding think tanks that deny global warming. So. The issue changed in terms of how corporate America was lined up, but the ideology became even more strong.
And with the ideology, is there something, you talk about the Republican brain. I mean, is there evidence that there is, that there are differences, that there is, are there certain areas of the brain that light up during certain moments that don't light up for someone who's not Republican? Does the ideology have a structural base?
Well, that is the cutting edge, and they are working on that, and we have to be careful. There are, published cognitive neuroscience studies showing a variety of differences between liberals and conservatives in structure, in the sense that, like, there's a little more gray matter in one area than another. Also in, response in a particular kind of neuroscience test in a particular region of the brain. This is the new stuff, and you got to be careful. These studies are small numbers of people, but they do. The reason that these studies were done was because we had such a large body of evidence from psychology to begin with. So people went looking in the brain for liberal conservative differences in the kinds of areas that you would expect based on a huge body of psychology research. So there's going to be much, much more of this. And so far what's been found is consistent with the large body of psychology research. So it's not like you can throw it out. It's that you have to describe it with the right caveats. And with that said, I'm happy to describe it, but I think it's important to put the caveats out there first.
Yeah, I think the caveats are very important. But so give us a little bit of information about the brain and the science that supports these ideas.
I mean, and it's not just the brain; it's also physiological responses. So, one of the first and most important was a study showing that liberals were using were performing better at a task that required them to change a habitual pattern of responding. So in other words, you would look at a screen and you would see a letter and it would flash and it would flash and you had to push a button. And then you had to stop if it was a different letter, and it was M or W, I think, so it's very hard to do it fast. And liberals were doing better at that, and they were showing more activity in the anterior cingulate cortex when they did it. So this was in Nature a couple years ago. And this is kind of, the anterior cingulate's known to be this part of the brain that kind of makes you change a habit and do something different than you would have done. And so how does this correlate with liberalism? Well, I mean, it's about more tolerance of uncertainty, ambiguity, change. And that was the reason that they were doing this to begin with, because that was obviously one of the findings that had been consistent in psychology for a long time about liberals. They're more open to new experience, they're more tolerant of ambiguity, they're more tolerant of uncertainty, et cetera. So that's why they went looking there. And then they found something. And another study also found more gray matter there in a different group of liberals that were in the UK. And also found more gray matter in the amygdala for conservatives. And the amygdala has been this area that they look at for conservatism. The amygdala is, the emotional fear and threat center conditioning your life-preserving responses to danger. And of course, we all have those kind of responses. But in one study, they did find more gray matter in the right amygdala for conservatives. And again, you can spin out the story of why do we go looking for this? I mean, because conservatism and sort of the fear of threats and the reaffirmation of the existing order because you're afraid of change. I mean, it sort of works. It sort of makes sense. There's also the physiology stuff, which is coming out now, which is fascinating, where they put eye trackers on liberals and conservatives, or they put instruments to measure skin conductance, and then they show them collages of images, for instance, and they find the conservatives, their eyes go to different places than liberals' eyes go really fast. They go to the threatening, scary things, and the liberals are like looking at the picture of the happy bunny rabbit. So, I mean, I'm not kidding. This is... and the conservatives are having more skin conductance, which is again, everyone's having skin conductance when they see something threatening, but conservatives are having more intense, and this is again, it's like they're getting ready to protect themselves. So what this leads to is the idea that literally worldviews are different, views of the world, experience of the world is different. This is all still new, cutting edge, but all published. But again, I'll just say that the reason it exists is that there's this gigantic body of research that you really can't dispute anymore, that liberals and conservatives have different personalities. And that's just the bedrock, and you can't get around it. And so people are going and looking for the actual basis for that in the brain and in the body.
I think it's just a fascinating idea that that there is a difference in world experience, that the perspective on the world and the way it is experienced can be completely different between two people. And the brain is our filter for the world. It allows us to have whatever experience it is. So knowing this and having the science that backs up this idea, how do we move forward with the political system that we have now? How do we apply these results to actually start working together? Because evolutionarily, protectionism is good. It's going to help your group survive, right? But then being able to deal with change is also a great tactic. And how do you make these people mix?
I know. And so we don't know why or whether evolution did this for a reason, and that's kind of getting into really controversial territory. But yeah, you could hypothesize that. So it would be great if we were protectionism for everybody, but unfortunately, it's kind of tribal. You're either with us or against us. And so how do you make this mix? I mean, the scientists that I talk to, and one of them who's done the physiology studies, John Hibbing at Nebraska, he really makes a plea for toleration that I agree with, that if you really start to accept that people are different, he actually makes an analogy to sexual orientation, and he says that people were more tolerant once they recognize that homosexuality is not a choice. And he kind of says that politics should be similar. I mean, I, as a liberal who believes in equality, naturally, this is one of our liberal emotional impulses that we believe in very strongly, support this. But the problem is, I don't think that conservatives are going to accept the reality of the research. I think they're going to dismiss it. And not just dismiss it, I think they're going to see it as an attack. I have lots of evidence for this. Including
personally, some of it. Right?
Well, sure, personally, but I mean, it's not like I'm the first person to talk about this and to be misunderstood. And I mean, I tell the story in the book of John Jost, who's, and his team of researchers. He's at NYU. He's kind of pioneered the psychology side of ideology. And they published this gigantic study, meta-analysis, in which they pulled together, I forget how many studies, but a lot of them, and just all the research on the psychology of ideology, and they did a meta-analysis, and they showed that again and again, you find these consistent things across countries for liberals and conservatives. Liberals, more open to experience in terms of personality. Conservatives, less open to experience. having more need for closure, need to have fixed beliefs, studies on authoritarianism. I mean, the stuff, so it's a consistent body of evidence, and they do this, and they say this is normal. We have this normal range of personality, normal range of psychology, and it turns out that it has a political implication depending where you are on the range. And so what happens, the study comes out, and conservatives say, the conservatives are crazy study has just been published, and that's the headline that they gave to it. And then they all attacked it for about 2 days, and then they forgot about it. And meanwhile, research went on for 10 more years. And, there's a heck of a lot more. So what do you do? I mean, I don't think that we're going to have this kind of stuff go down any more easily than the global warming stuff goes down.
Yeah, very likely not. There was a blog post that I found by Greg Layden on Culture is Science, Science is Culture, where he's using a sciencedebate.org poll or survey. He comes up with the headline, turns out the war on science is a fabrication of the enemy, and that there's a lot of evidence within this. He says that there's a lot of evidence within the survey that people across the spectrum are pro-science and don't have issues with science, and there's no war on science. Have you come into contact with this idea?
Just recently. This is the Science Debate 2008, now 2012 poll. Is that what it is?
Yes. Yeah.
So I didn't look at it in great detail. I think that calling the war on science over seems a little premature. I don't remember exactly what the poll showed, but if I remember correctly, they were asking people if they wanted a debate on science.
Yeah.
Which they do, I guess, right? I mean, I think the poll showed that. And I don't know, that's not that surprising. I mean, everybody claims to be for science, if you ask them in the abstract, which is good for the idea that there should be such a debate, and I support it. But, I mean, when the rubber hits the road on some of these controversial issues, then you don't really get such contentment about science anymore. So I'm not sure that I would say that it's all over and well and good. I think that it's worse than ever in terms of some of the key issues, especially climate change, which is the one that is most pressing and urgent, and we seem completely incapable of dealing with. So.
Yeah, completely incapable of being able to come together at the table to be able to, do anything about it. There's too much fighting, people. Tired of it.
Yeah, well, this is why I think we need to look at it in a really, really different way. We have a government built by white men of the Enlightenment who were great in a lot of ways, but they didn't understand how human beings actually work in this way, and they were a little too idealistic about it in terms of the idea that we would rationally solve our problems. So. Mm-hmm. All the research says that it doesn't work that way, and so
that's one thing I disagree with too. I think they made our system of government so complicated and so difficult to get anything done that they fully understood that they couldn't trust individuals or even a simple majority of individuals to make the right choices, which is why it's so hard to get anything done in politics.
Yeah, well, that is true. I mean, I guess I'm thinking more of Thomas Jefferson, and we need a well-informed public. Right. And so the research says that even that is not enough. Yeah. If you're well-informed, you can be even more dogged in your wrong beliefs. So I talk about that a lot in the book, how knowing more, especially if you're partisan, can make you completely unreasonable. So
I saw that you posted an interview that you were interviewed on MSNBC. Have you been interviewed on Fox News yet? Have you?
Oh no, I mean the joy of that has not yet come, but I'm sure that they'll be dying to have me soon. So, the book has got a big Fox section in it, and what I say is that all the evidence shows that if you watch Fox News, then you are overwhelmingly likely to be wrong about all kinds of factual matters, not just scientific, by the way. I don't treat the science issues as separate anymore because I think the same kind of biased reasoning affects all issues. And so I don't see how you get around it. You know, Fox is contributing to people being misinformed, and people who are conservative who are opting in are also, you know, essentially putting themselves on offer to be misinformed. So it's a feedback mechanism, and I kind of explain some of the psychology behind that. But you just can't get around it. I mean, every time I say misinformed, whether it's about science or it's about the economy or whatever, I have the consensus of the fact checkers behind me. All right, you know, I mean, these are not like tough things. Like there really were no death panels. I mean, you know, this is PolitiFact's lie of the year. I wasn't picking ones where, you know, there was a lot of ambiguity. You know, President Obama really is not a Muslim, and he really is not from Kenya. And we can really bank on that with a high degree of reliability.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In the book, you also bring up Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. And in fact, you know, in the very start, you have, you know, and we talked in the beginning of this interview about Stephen Colbert. Do you see the two of them as influential at this point in current politics? And you know, do they simply cater to the liberal side of things?
Well, there's research on that. I mean, conservatives, at least with
I don't
Colbert,
ask leading questions. Sorry. No.
At least with Colbert, there's a study out there, if I remember correctly, it's that conservatives think he's one of them. Mm-hmm. So they dig it. The liberals and conservatives both thought Colbert was funny, but liberals thought it was irony and satire, and conservatives thought he was really a conservative. So if that's true, then he does have some bipartisan appeal. But I mean, look, they're very interested in this liberal thing called reality, and that's been a constant theme of what they've been up to for a very long time, and it's epitomized in Colbert's Truthiness skit. You know, like, why do people think they get to make up their own reality based on their gut? Which turns out to anticipate some of the research that we're now getting on conservatives and liberals. Yeah. So I think they're. I mean, I feel that they're in the same boat as a lot of us, in the sense that you know, they'd be willing to be pretty even-handed about matters where it is just opinion, but matters of fact where people just won't cop to reality. It's like, you know, you just can't give in on that. How could you? It doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, that's my read on those guys.
When it doesn't make any sense, let's make a joke. Let's create a comedic skit.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting book. I have been reading through it, and you bring up some really interesting points of research and some, you know, lots of points of fact that cannot be debated, as you've said. And so, you know, I think that it's a really interesting read, and that I hope a bunch of people pick it up. And as you said, I hope that people take it with the intention of trying to inform themselves and to not bash and not you know, attack one side versus the other, but to actually inform conversation.
I'm ready to get along, but I'm not ready to compromise on reality. So that could be the common ground. You know, let's accept the same body of facts, and then let's argue only about opinion. I'd love to go back there.
Your best chance of compromise, though, is going to be compromising a certain amount. We have to give up a certain amount of reality. We're going to have to do it. I mean, to all come to the table, we're going to have to give up large swaths, huge territories, vast territories of reality in order to sit at the table. But it's sort of like Thanksgiving. What we need to start treating the Capitol like is like the Thanksgiving dinner, where you're there with family who you know you don't agree with. They're going to go up there and say a bunch of things that you would, if you know.
What field do you want to get rid of? What body of knowledge do you want to ditch? I mean, this would be
you don't ditch it. You don't actually ditch it. But it's like there's certain stuff that when you get to the dinner table, you're like, okay, this is off limits. I know that if if old Uncle Krusty over there starts going off on how global warming doesn't exist, all I'm going to do by rebutting him is create this big argument. It's going to ruin the family gathering, and everybody's going to get really irritated and on edge. So the best thing to do is just pour him another drink, offer him a seat in the comfy chair in the living room while everybody goes back to the meal. Unfortunately, though, yeah, you're right. Our country is run by politicians, so we're going to have to deal with this in some very real ways. And there's
probably some obscure field that we could offer, like as a sacrifice or something. But no, we're not going there. We're not going. Yeah,
because it's a slippery slope. Once you start giving in, and it's really unfortunate because I've been amazed in this last, because I'm probably, I don't know how old you are exactly, but I think I'm older than you. I seem to be older than everybody.
Well, we can disclose if you want, but
they're going to be turning 40 this year.
Yeah, okay, you're a little older. Congratulations.
Okay, so I have watched over and I know there's people out there probably who are older than me, but I've watched in my lifetime the big shift in politics. I mean, there wasn't arguments when I was. My mother worked for the Democratic Party all of her life. So when I had a sick day at school, I was at the Democratic Party headquarters. That's where I went and hung out. We were when I was sick from school. She took me to work, and I'd hang out there and overhear the conversation. So yeah, I was brainwashed as a Democrat from youth. But the arguments that I heard then over policy weren't bringing religion to the forefront, weren't dismissing science. The conservatives, people are saying, the Republican Party to me does not look like conservatism. Because what I think of conservatism, I think of a William F. Buckley. I think of people who are fiscally conservative, who do not want to spend money excessively, who want to, or focused on the economy. Conservatives were also rallying for a lot of environmental things. They were for the parks.
This is the change of these 30, 40 years. It's a radical change.
It's a very radical definition.
Change. But it is an authoritarian conservatism now. And that is a religious conservatism. That is a dogmatic conservatism. That is a black and white conservatism in which liberals are like the enemy. Yeah. So that's the situation. All the research shows that that's the case.
Yeah, William F. Buckley would be a liberal today. In fact, the Reagan, who they have still the icon of the conservative or the Republicans, he would not make it. He is far left on every issue that you need to be on to be even a candidate, even considered a candidate in the Republican Party right now. And so this is when I'm bashing Republicans, I'm not bashing conservatives. If you're a fiscal conservative, we've probably got a lot in common. I am too. I think we spend way too much money as a government, and we should be focused less on a lot of things and more on, obviously, on research and science for economic reasons. But what we're discussing now is we have left the page. We have left the playbook of what used to be the type of discussions that went on in politics, and it's become bizarre. To us old cats, none of this makes sense. None of this should even be on the table.
I know older cats who worked in Washington when things were normal, and they were conservative by the definition that held then. And I can tell you that they don't recognize it now either. Yeah. So, yeah, it is transformed. And, going back is hard to contemplate. Although I think that, with time and generational change, things will change too. But yeah, no, at the moment, I mean, and this is why I think you have to think about it psychologically, and you have to think about authoritarianism, and you have to think about need for closure, and you have to think about lack of openness. And you have to think about the Democrats as being the psychological opposites today of Republicans. And that's why the clashes are so brutal. And that's why they're so emotional, and that's why there's no compromises, because you've got really, really irreconcilable ways of experiencing the world pitted against each other emotionally. So,
two states. We are two states. Everyone, Chris Mooney, the Republican brain. We are at the end of the show, and we've kept Chris Mooney up rather late.
Amazon. No, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you guys. You know, you guys do a great show, and I'm so glad to be on again. And I really appreciate that you've had me on with all my books. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us. It's been
We're
really
big
great
fans,
once again
Chris.
to speak with you. Yeah.
Good to talk
Have
to
a
you.
great night. I hope that your Fox experience goes well when it happens.
Yeah, no, I know they hope that too. All right.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
Okay, everybody out there. Chris Mooney's book, Republican Brain, is available if you are interested. There's some very interesting stuff in there. And on next week's show, I'm not going to be here. It's going to be Justin and Blair.
Woohoo!
That's
Yay.
right. Justin and Blair
Where are
taking
you
over.
going to be? You're coming back, right?
I'm coming back. It's just 1 week. 1 week, I'm going to a conference in Boulder, Colorado, called the Conference on World Affairs, and I will be speaking about various world affairs.
Awesome.
The brain, genes, DIY stuff. What are some of my other panels? Oh, science storytelling. I have one panel, science storytelling with Seth Shostak from SETI. That's going
he's
to be
nice
a lot
guy.
of fun.
I like him.
He's really great. Yeah. So a lot of stuff that I'm looking forward to there next week, but I'm going to be so swamped that there's just no way this is going to happen. So Blair, you get to do more than one story. You can have a downer story and you can have upper stories. You can have
I'll try to
your-
work on that.
you can have your animal corner. You can do other subjects if you
my
feel
God.
like it. Yeah. You can branch out.
It's like Christmas.
Exactly. Scientific.
Where are you going to do
Christmas.
the show from?
I guess my house.
Okay.
All right.
You don't want to go? Do you want to go to the studio?
Are we allowed in the studio?
I don't know. Yeah, we should find out first. You're right.
I would go to the studio.
We should. Maybe that should be the first time I do an actual show at the studio. That might be good timing.
Oh, dear. All right. So that does it for this week's show. Shout outs to everyone on Science with a Twist for posting this last week.
Yes, and thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Twis is available as a podcast. Just search for This Week in Science in the iTunes directory. If you have an Android device, you can look for the Twis for Droid app in the Android marketplace, which is now, for some of you, the Google Play. Is that what it's called? It's Twis, the number 4 Droid app in the Android marketplace. Also, we're available on the iPhone simply as Twis, Twis.
For more information on anything that you've heard here today, show notes are going to be available on our website, twist.org, thanks to the lovely intern, Blair. And we also want to hear from you, so email us at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com or justin@thisweekinscience.com.
Be sure to put Twis, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into oblivion. If you want to get the hold of us quicker, you can also contact us at Dr. Kiki or at Jacksonfly on the Twitter, or at the what's the Twitter for the direct
It's
for the
Twist Science. TWISCIENCE.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love your feedback. If there is a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, please let us know.
And we'll be back here next week, same time, same place. And we sure hope that you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from today's show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And this week in science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This week in science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in 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 science.